Hi everybody, welcome to the Live Sound Podcast, episode 2. If you managed to catch last week, then thanks so much for coming back. If not, you can find it on YouTube and just search Live Sound Podcast. This week we have Dave McDonald with us, an unbelievable front of house engineer with great CV ranging everywhere from Portishead to Frank Ocean to Adele. I think this interview offers some really great insights in more the personality side of what we're doing and how to conduct yourself in the industry. I think Dave's a really interesting guy and has got a lot of great things to say. So without further ado, take it away, Dave.
Right, so welcome Dave McDonald to the Live Sound Podcast. How are you today, my friend?
I'm very well, sir. Enjoying the sun.
Yeah, good. How's the strange thing of being at home?
Well, my house is looking the best it's ever looked at the moment. I've knocked down a garden wall. I've done plenty of painting, and not my normal stuff, but the house is looking great. So I'm just coping with it,
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, everyone else is.
So all right, then. Well, we'll get straight into it. And first thing that we've been asking everybody, obviously, is we'll go back to the beginning and how and why you got into all of this. Whether it was you fell into it by accident or whether it was something that you actively wanted to do. And so if you take us back to the beginning and tell us where it all started.
I think the beginning is being, a young boy of about 5 or 6 and just fascinated with record players, records, music, and how things worked. I used to take apart a lot of old record players, which my granddad really hated. And I was just fascinated that, how did they do this? How did they do that? And then I got to about 16, 17, and I started an apprenticeship with a theatre company doing lights, which I soon discovered I hated, absolutely hated. Partly because of the person who was teaching me wasn't, he just wasn't interested in what I was trying to do. So they had a sound department. I left, joined the sound department. There was a guy called Rob Smith from Bristol, who was like part of Smith and Mighty, part of the original Bristol sound, genius engineer. But at that stage, he had a reggae band. He asked if I would come along and watch their band and sort of look what the engineer was doing. And so we turned up to this little gig in Torquay. I think there was about 800 people turned up at this gig, and he just said to me, "Go on then." And that was a baptism by fire. And that was it. I was in.
So what was the moment where, what was the first kind of gig where you thought, right, this could be something that I do, whether it be financial or whether it be, just a case of, I'm hooked. This is the first kind of proper show.
Yeah, that's funny because I never thought of it on a financial side whatsoever. It was something that I enjoyed doing, and the fact that you were fed and given beer, and I was seeing different parts of the country, and I was with my friends. That was what it was about. It was only later on that, the first sort of band that I worked with after that was another West Country band, and they were called Head, and they were sort of made up from a few different bands back from the 80s. And all of a sudden I got a retainer, and it's like, bloody hell, this is all right. And then I started to really knuckle down and learn my trade a bit. I say knuckle down, but I learned my style.
Yeah, I think there's always that kind of thing in it where it becomes, for me, it was I'd been touring probably 5 years or something, and as I say, not a care in the world, just, oh my God, getting to see all these places with your friends and have these amazing experiences. And then there was a kind of thing that hit me, and I thought, well, actually, I think this is what I want to do for the rest of my life now. So now I need to work out. Now I do need to think about money, and I do need to make sure that I can actually survive. I was living with a girlfriend at the time, and we had a family member as a rent guarantor because, I didn't have enough income to prove, and it, as we all started, but I just remember there was that kind of, I ask about the financial side of things, just for anyone who's kind of starting in this, that, like I say, certainly for me, there was a point where I actually kind of, you do get people coming to you, and you do start doing those kind of, proper gigs, proper tours, and you think, actually, this is all right money. And, I remember, I went out and, got a flat, signed on it all for myself, and, I'm going to do this myself and spend a year kind of proving that this can be something that I do, you know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny thinking back that now you're talking about it. It's, I met my partner. She used to call me 50p man because that's all I ever had in my pocket was 50 pence. And we're still together. She is so used to my whole lifestyle from that. It's like 30 years ago. But it was a passion. I was watching all my friends around getting jobs and they were earning good money and being able to get a car and being able to do this and that. But I was so passionate about this that that didn't bother me. All that mattered was like doing this gig, creating something, doing that. Then that spiraled into making a career out of it.
I think that's really important. I always got it from my dad that it was, if you want to do anything you want to do, if you want to work out, if you work hard enough, you can make it happen. And I was the same. Constantly having to call my mum up because I'd broken down on the way to the studio because the £3 change I found in my pocket wasn't enough fuel to get there, and it was years and years of that. And then all of a sudden there was just a click that was, well, actually, I think I could do this. And going back to what you're saying about your partner as well, I think it's often overlooked how important it is to have somebody, the right person at home.
It is the one that understands you, because I mean, boy, this business is you know what it's like. We're away for ages at a time. When we come back off tour, we are not the most focused family people when we come back off tour, because our brains have been sort of geared to something else. So it's
that adjustment period when you first get home is definitely an interesting one, isn't it?
I heard a great story years ago about Bono, when he used to come back off the tour. They used to book him into a hotel very close to his family for like 2 weeks, so he could sort of like de-acclimatise, back into the family role. Whereas what my partner used to do was she used to put points on the toilet paper and put a kettle by the side of the bed just to take the piss out of me, to bring me back to reality very, very quickly. But but yeah, it's a hard one. It is a hard one.
Yeah. So moving forward then, obviously there's a very strong connection with Portishead. How did that come about, and how did that shape your career from there?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I used to work in it was a stage where I kind of stopped doing live mixing, only because I got asked to work in this demo studio, and I thought, I kind of started off in a very little tiny studio. I thought, I'll give this a go. So I joined the studio, and we used to do a lot of punk bands. It used to be great. You'd come in, you'd do a whole album in a day, and it'd be pressed, mastered, and out by the end of the week somewhere, in some little shop in Germany or something like that. It was brilliant, great experience. In fact, the first band I ever did, which was which is crazy thinking about it, was hadn't really worked in the studio properly. I went in there and it was an Oi Skinhead band turned up. Me doing an Oi Skinhead band on my first session. It was a baptism by fire. But anyway, I worked in the studio. I did all the little indie bands in sort of West Country. But one day, this young lad, a guy called Jeff Barrow, at the time, came into the studio, and we just started talking, and he was like playing some music, and I'm really sort of fascinated with what he was doing. And so what I would do was I would give up all my spare studio time that I'd have, and I just dedicated to his project, working with him, And that's how it developed. It went from strength to strength. Next thing you had like Nana Cherry's husband got involved and pumped a little bit of cash into it, and we just built it up from there. So it's interesting. I really got into the studio side of that stage really, really heavily. And then when it started to go out touring, got straight back into the live mixing, on a much bigger scale. And that's really when I cut my teeth, when you started getting the old big analogs out and, flash and flood PA and all that sort of stuff.
Everybody that we've spoken to so far has started in the studio because that was the more accessible kind of way and the easier way to get in. And then they kind of, sometimes wanted to go the live route, sometimes just found themselves kind of, well, if you can do it in the studio, you can do it live, and kind of falling into it. It's actually interesting that you're the first person that actually started on the live thing and then went into the studio. So then going, being so involved in the music that you've made in the studio from a production point of view and knowing it as well as you do, and then moving back into the live side of things, how did that affect how you mixed that? Did you approach that different to things you've done before?
Completely different, a whole new learning curve of basically trying to, when you kind of mix live, you're kind of creating a whole different style. It's like an offshoot of how that record should sound. Whereas working this way, it was trying to make it sound like the record, which was quite different. And back then we didn't have, initially, it was analog, so we didn't have automation. And if you ever listen to any of those first two albums, every song has a different kind of drum sound or a snare tone or this and that. So we came up with this idea, which is crazy, which was a DMP7, a Yamaha DMP7. It was, I think it was an eight channel automated mixer, one of their first things that they did, and it had two like SPX 90s in it, some piece of crap like that. And so we had the whole drums running into it, and then a stereo output into the first two channels, and we would spend about an hour just going through all the drum tracks of each song, in the sound check. And that would be it. So, that was my first automation. Just hit record. This the MP7 would like have the next song lined up, and it worked though. Yeah, it worked. So interesting.
Amazing. So from then on, obviously, I want to talk to you about the Adele stuff, because I think it'd be interesting for a lot of people to hear how it works. A lot of us pick up bands along the way, or get. We get the opportunity to work with bands that have kind of already been there and done it, and you don't. So, I mean, it's got to be an exciting thing to pick up someone at essentially obscurity and then work with them until, in your case, he's one of the biggest artists in the world.
Mm-hmm.
How was that for you? And did you feel, was there a lot of mounting pressure from that kind of side of things, or?
No, I mean, initially, no. I mean, obviously initially there wasn't any pressure, because it was interesting. I mean, we were, the first sort of like US kind of run. I mean, I can remember doing a little place up in Portland for disabled kids and stuff, but there was probably about 10 people in the room, like doing shows for 10 people, but you could just tell there was something, it was just very captivating. Everyone who saw it was just like, and it was very scaled down. So it was very easy in that sense. I mean, a vocalist who has got a great range, who has got a lot of power, and just delivers night after night. I mean, that makes my job easy, The only problems I ever had were, like you'd have occasionally a rank acoustic guitar, which was, because at that stage we weren't even traveling with instruments, you'd have a nail turn up, and all that sort of stuff. But so it was very, very easy. As it grew, the formula was there. Do you know what I mean? The way that everyone was working on the same page. So you don't actually feel the pressure, I don't think, because you're just steaming ahead. You don't see what's actually happening around you. And since not being involved with it, you sit back and you think, bloody hell, that was a period of my life where, all this happened. You just pick up the pieces that you didn't notice at the time,
That's quite interesting. So it's just head down and
head down.
Almost oblivious to how big you're getting.
Exactly the same with the Portishead thing. Head down, just steaming ahead. You're just in a bubble, and your focus is just that bubble, and you're just there. I think for me personally, if I get caught up with all the stuff around it and everything, you turn into an asshole. You know what I mean. You start to overrate yourself, and it's like it's just as good as the next man. It's just that focus, being with people all trying to create the same thing. I think is special.
How does, obviously, when you've got, you've started when she's at that level, so obviously you develop a strong relationship with the artist because you're living in such close quarters with them. Mm-hmm. So how, obviously, when she's getting to that astronomical level, how does the relationship between the artists change? Like, obviously,
it always changes. That will always change, and you have to almost just remember you're an engineer. Too, you're providing a service. You're being paid for that service. But there's nothing wrong with being a friend and being, and advice and stuff like that. But it's like Icarus, don't fly too close to the sun, or your wings will melt. That's some advice I would give to everyone. It's you're working for someone at the end of the day.
We'll move on to gear.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, we know each other from the Allen and Heath train, so it's a bit of an obvious one for me. But console of choice and why?
There's two. There's the D Live, obviously, and there's any of the old Midases, the XL3s, 4s, or Heritage. Ease of use, man. I'm not a technical guy, It's just ease of use and sonically sounding good.
Yeah,
are the two important things to me. And then that means I've got a palette to work with. I've got my paint brushes and I've got my paint, and I can just paint. I just don't want to be sort of like, oh well, I can't find this and I can't find that, because that moment goes instantly. So that's why I like it, the D Live, and that's why I like the old Midases, because high pass filter is my friend.
So it's how then, obviously, if you're working on a like you say, you're not trying to overcomplicate things, you're going at it from a much more musical perspective.
Yeah.
How did your mix style change moving from analog to digital? Interesting what you're saying about doing the old Portishead thing and almost doing that kind of hybrid thing before the days of digital consoles anyway. So how was there much of a shift for you, or did you make digital work? Some people changed that.
I use digital the same way as I use analog. All my effects and returns, I still float, I'll have my returns on the far right hand side, which I can throw up and down. I work exactly the same style. The only difference to me now is I have layers of, channels where I can just flick through. So you learn a pattern of where they are each song, flick to A, flick to B, flick to C, blah, blah, blah. But
a lot of you working on muscle memory and looking up at the show, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really can't stand those guys with their head down. I'm guilty of it sometimes, and I have to whack myself across the head, because that's not right. You should be watching. And it also, when you're watching players play, you think, oh, he's going to go there. Oh, I can just give it a little bit more, and just. Whereas if you got your head down, you're mixing by numbers,
So I'd hazard a guess from saying that you're not a snapshots guy.
No. No, I have done it a few times. When I work with Air, because we have 14 analog keyboards on stage and stuff like that, and the complexity of that does mean that I do have to use. Well, no, I don't, because I used to do it on an analog with them years ago. But it does make my life a lot easier having that snapshots. But then, I found that I have fucked up quite a few times with snapshots. It
can be quite catastrophic if you haven't got the time to put it together properly.
Yeah, especially when you go from a vocal track to an instrumental track, and they say, they try, the artist is a bit hesitant before he says thank you or something like that, and you've already whacked over into this instrumental track and shut the vocal mics off and stuff. These things happen.
Okay, so next question, staying with gear. System of choice and any specific kind of configuration or any particular way that you like it set up? In the skill world, of course.
Yeah, system of choice. I've always been a massive fan of L-acoustics ever since. I was lucky enough to, I think it was about 96, being in the south of France in a amphitheatre. And I was using turbo sound, flash and flood at that stage, which was the staple. And suddenly seeing this line array, which I hadn't seen a line array before. Just suddenly hearing it and just being completely blown away by it, and to tell you the truth, still to this day, I do love VDOS, it's something really whoa, there's something very musical about it. And then K1 and K2, I love them both. So they're my systems of choice. Not really a huge fan of D&B. I get into arguments with people about it. I'll say for me that's there's a sound to it which I don't like. It all sounds good, but there's nothing like that. Nothing that little sparkle of spice on it. This just doesn't have that.
Yeah. So how was, obviously, like you say, you discovered that kind of that VDOS sound when you were still working with point source boxes.
Yeah.
Was there anything that shifted? Was it a natural thing for you over onto line array?
I did struggle initially because the distortion rate was so low on the L acoustic compared to the turbo sound that I did learn very, very quickly that the turbo sound was giving you the impression of power, but that was just the distortion. And it was like I'd gone from, analog tape to CD, which is, in the real world, a bad thing, but for us mixing is a fucking great thing, you know what I mean?
Interesting, you've kind of, I fully agree. For me, it was always when you first started kind of coming across VDOS and DV and things like that, it always sounded infinitely better, but I just had that power, and you had to use bottom end so much more creatively and to create that impact and create that power, but then at the same time being really careful still with high pass filters and everything, and not trying to trying to invent this power but still keep it reined in, so you didn't demolish all of your headroom and end up just putting every killing the subs every show. And it was for me, it was definitely a big learning curve, more so going from analog to digital, really.
I don't think I could go back. I mean, it'd be quite interesting to actually have one of those old systems thrown in front of me and just the
analog console, 8 compressors, 8 gates, 4 reverbs, and a point system, and see what happens.
Yeah. I'll probably go home and go, I'm shit now.
It's always an interesting thing, and we've brought this up, in other interviews, and it's how do you feel? I mean, obviously the public's perception of music and what they want to hear changes with the trends of records being made, but there's the argument that well, I saw Led Zeppelin back here and it sounded incredible, and they're being mixed on a 7-channel mixer amp or whatever, and then now we're in a position where people have, we've got over 100 channels, 200 channels, whatever, and there was that thing, like you're saying, you're behind a Midas or whatever, and you've got your outboard rack and you've got X amount of comps, X amount of gates, then suddenly you're behind a D-Live, and for every single input channel you've got multiple compressors, multiple processors, dynamic processors as well, and you've got your full complement of processing on the outputs and everything like that. So obviously not the temptation, but to expand and to improve and to advance your mix, you do start using more and more and more of this.
Yeah, I try to be quite disciplined. I work with some people who just have to put something on everything, and I'm just thinking, well, obviously there's something wrong if you're putting something on everything. It's all about the source for me. And I'll go up on stage and I'll speak to musicians, and we're getting depth about what they're doing, and the sound and where we're trying to head and all that sort of stuff. That's where it comes from, not trying to add shit on your board, because for me that's, I remember way back, with a lot of the guys using waves in the early days, just plastering everything, just so much stuff, just it's squeezing the chicken's neck till there was nothing left, what I mean? I'm wondering why their mix just sounds terrible. It's because you just overdone it.
So you're really reaching your kind of, the dream mix. You're still going for the same point that you were, the same sonic, the same sound that you were.
Totally. There's only a few things I really like using. Obviously I use gates like everybody else, but I did spend 2 years using no gates or compressors live, and I'm really, really homing in on the sounds on stage and getting really in depth into it. And that was a really good discipline, But
something like the Adele thing is, again, all about dynamics and all about openness and about that one thing.
Yeah, it's dynamics. I mean, the whole game for me is all about dynamics, having it quiet, bringing things in, oh, here we go, bang it, push it, bring it back. And for the punter, I think it's really, really important that, you give their ears a rest, or it's like being a magician the whole time, it's like, look at his hand and you're going to rob him with this one, you know what I mean? It's all about that sort of thing. Makes it so much interesting. I hate when I go to gigs and it's just like one full-on, thing from start to finish. That's not mixing. That's just an operator. You could just turn on a record.
Yeah, it's all about that musical movement at every point.
Yeah, totally. And there's things like I love. This is one of the things I love. Sometimes when you make a mistake and you fuck up, but you hear something in that mistake that you made, you think, "Fuck, I'm going to use that next time." I really like that, and I love those moments. You feel really chuffed about yourself.
Yeah, it's always connected to me just being that, you know, I have one snapshot and it's the start of the show.
Yeah.
You know, I've always gone to a point where I want to be playing it. You know, I'm playing an instrument the same as everybody else, and I feel off what the artist's doing that night and what the crowd is doing that night. And as much as you're achieving, you know, as much as you're trying to achieve consistency has a different, you know, even the most consistent gig is different, and it ebbs and flows every night depending on what you have, you know. So for me, I've never been that mega plug-in, mega snapshot guy, because I don't want a desk to tell me what to do.
Have you, here's one for you that I love. This is when you have that one snapshot that you start with. Have you ever had where you, I call it over tightening the nut? So you've done, like, say a row of like 10 gigs with this starting snapshot, and you kind of save that snapshot at the end of the night, and then you get to this point and you listen to it, you go, that sounds really shit. I've lost something from that, where I started from, to that point. And it's like, because you're tweaking every night and you're refining, and then all of a sudden you've lost that magic that was in that starting snapshot. And then I quite often I've had to, right, guys, we're gonna have to do a longer sound check today, because I'm gonna have to, you know, rejig this and reassign it and stuff like that, you know.
I'll save on day one, and then I save every night. And for the most part, the way that I'll do it is tomorrow I'll start from where we've just finished, but I'll zero all my output EQ. I use a hell of a lot of subgroups, and I zero my subgroup EQs, because I like to, you know, I'm leaving the channels alone a lot of the time, and I'm doing a lot of stuff on output EQ to suit where we are.
Yeah.
But I'll write myself loads of notes, like, you know, shit guitar tonight, or, you know, look at the vocal reverb or something, or absolute write-off, use the night before, you know what I mean? So I do always try and kind of move on from the night before, because as you say, you are finessing, you are changing something, you might just choose a different reverb or a different thing that, oh, actually I want to keep that, but then I'll have to write myself a note, because at the same time I want to keep that bit of change, but I hated the rap tom sound tonight, or something like that, you know. So I'm constantly writing myself mostly abusive notes during the show, telling myself how crap I am. But
I wish I was that organised, because I think I can remember it. And what happens is I like finish the gig, you know, and, you know, pack down the console and everything like that. Right, I'm gonna have a quick word with the drummer about this, you know. And something, you know, I go and find the drum, and I just have one drink, and it's like, it's gone. There was something I really wanted to talk to you about, but it's gone.
Just one song, but I can't remember what, and I can't remember which song. But I'll try and listen out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe. So one more gear related question. Your desert island piece of gear.
Oh yes. So there's two bits. There's the SRE 555 Roland Space Echo, the Chorus Echo. I mean, genius, incredible piece of equipment. If you put a vocal on it, you put it on any mix, it's just like a carrier wave. It just that echo and the analogness and just the woe and flutter just makes it so musical. It's incredible. So I mean, you can, you know, and after a while you can learn to use one as an instrument, throwing in delays, doing all kinds of mad shit. You know, it really is a musical piece of outboard. Frustrated musician at front of house, I think. And the studio bit, and sometimes, which they also have on the D Live, is the LA2, Teletronic LA2.
Yeah. I remember it was you that told me that when that very first came out, and I was speaking to you about it, and said, have you tried it? And you said, it's all about the emphasis. And a brave statement that I remember saying, that Robin Clark's made an LA2 better. Yeah.
I think he has. Because, I mean, it's more dynamic, that's for sure. I mean, you can really, 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 you know, hold things like that, you know, or you can make it very musical. But I noticed that if you use it well, it makes your mix just sound beautiful. That vocal just sits in there. Everything is just like those records that they made in the past, you know, it just sounds great, you know. I love it. Robin Clark.
The next thing I want to talk to you about is what we were talking about last time I saw you, I think at the TPI Awards, with the insane stuff that you're doing at the moment in the various interesting gigs in very interesting places.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I can't really talk too much about that, you know. I'm sort of like pinned down and sort of, you know, but it's like doing a lot of 5.1 and 7.1 outdoor concerts, which has, well, it's been a huge learning curve. You know, I think everyone should try it at some stage, but and make your own mind up. But I really can't talk about it, to tell you the truth.
Oh, that's fine. That's but your approach to surround mixing then, as far as, you know, perspective and
my approach is definitely speak to the artist a lot, and whoever's doing the musical production, really speak to them, because what you will find is their perceived vision of surround sound and what is actually physically capable are two different things. So you can save a lot of time by really getting in there and really getting in depth.
Yeah. And whenever you're putting your centre point, are you the centre point, or are you doing it from the front of the stage, or
you're the one? You know, so I mean, you can have a left, right, centre, and then you know, in the field, left, right, and you're the one. You know, or you can have it 7.1, which is another set behind you as well. Yeah, I mean, my whole at the end of the day, I've done quite a bit of that now, and my whole feeling about it at the end of the day is sometimes you can feel like a trapped tiger in a cage, because you're just surrounded by all these sound sources all around you. We've only got 2 ears on our head, and they tend to be slightly pointing forward. Well, for most people. So I just look at a traditional stage with a left and right is what I've got on my head, is a left and a right, you know, and I think for me that is where it's at.
Do you feel there's a bit of a compromise from an audience perspective, that if you're not stood in the sweet spot, that
it's and that's why whenever I've done this, it has been, you know, 75% of the music has been coming from left and right, and all the other stuff is to use more or atmospherics and ambience and all that sort of stuff, you know. If you start trying to be too clever about it, you're going to piss your audience off, because, you know, you might have Joe Bloggs over, you know, the left hand side, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have 2 more questions for you. Pretty straight down the line. First one: biggest influence in all of this?
What, as in audio or in music? I mean, my biggest influence in music, you know, growing up listening to John Peel every night on my little Roberts radio, just switched me on to, you know, music full stop. That was my education. You know, my education at school was rubbish. That was the real deal.
Yeah. Well, I think that could be just as important, because obviously, you know, it's those musical upbringings that then you're putting that. I've always said, you know, anybody can learn to twiddle knobs and use gear and stuff, but, you know, people say to me, oh, you know, how do you do it? How did you learn? I said, well, I don't know if I did. I've got an idea in my head of how the band should sound, and thankfully, most people agree with me. There's always going to be some people that don't, and we've all had those mates that, you know, you'll go to front of house and watch your mixing, and they're stood having the time of life, and thinking, what are you listening to? Because this sounds tragic. But, you know, but everybody has, I suppose, that same thing. You know, you might like coffee, I hate the taste of it, but neither of us are wrong or right. It's just a perception, and obviously everyone perceives sound different. So I've always had that thing in my head of, this is just how I think the band should sound, and hopefully people agree with me, and if they do, then I'm lucky. You know,
I try to. It's quite weird. I don't know if you ever had this. You feel like you're very sensitive when you're mixing. Your senses are very, very. You're aware of, like, the heat of the room. You're aware of absolutely everything all around you. You're totally focused, pin sharp, and you could have a punter come over and say the wrong thing, and it can just twist you like that. So I try to get myself in that little cocoon, you know. It's like, and blank them out completely. You know, I've had occasions where, you know, someone's like said something and it's thrown me, and, you know.
I was talking about this with Brad, and it's the same thing, that you can be having the best show in the world, and, you know, if you're happy, it's because it's right. You've got your idea of how you want the band to sound. They agree with you. The management agrees with you. They're then paying you to do that, and, you know, and then somebody will come up and say, I can't hear this. And even though you know you can, because if you couldn't, you'd have turned it up. But then it plants that seed of doubt, and, you know.
It does. Also, there's another one as well, which is approaches, you know, difficult buildings. I love difficult buildings, you know, or things like, and it's how you approach a mix in different buildings. So I've got like a list of different ways that I can walk into somewhere and go, oh, well, okay. So today we're going to make this a beautiful mix. This is not going to be using power. This is going to be using the beauty of the vocal and using the room, keeping everything else way back and making it a much more, you know, sort of a thing of beauty. Yeah. Whereas you go into other rooms and it's like, you know, they're just dead, they're dry. You can absolutely, you know, rag them, you know what I mean? Yeah, so you know, there's so many aspects to this job. You know, it's yeah,
it's interesting because I think that kind of it almost seems a follow on for something that I've always thought that to keep sane doing this is managing expectations, is knowing that you're going to walk into a room and there's the world's worst sounding room with a horrible PA, awful gear, and this I'm not going to be able to get last night. I'm not going to be able to get my show. I'll be able to get a degree of it and, you know, run it how something similar to how I do. But then it's that thing of you can spend the entire show tearing your hair out and hating your life, or you can step back, manage your own expectations and know that if at least one person leaves the venue, that they come to that venue week in, week out, and they leave thinking, oh my God, I've never heard that venue sound like that. To that punter, that was one of the best sounding gigs. That was, you know, one of, if not the best sounding gigs I've ever heard in their backyard. So for me, that makes you worth your money at that point, because you still elevated the band above just another night, you know. I think it's interesting what you say about having multiple different approaches to cope.
For me, you have to, you know, from, you know, your marble to your churches to your, you know, proper concert halls to your theatres. I mean, a theatre is a different thing again, you know, to an actual concert hall, and you know, it's. So I think after years and years of doing it, you just have this sort of perspective of how to deal with these rooms, you know.
Yeah, well, I suppose it is just that, and it is the more you do it, the more you can have that educated guesstimate of, well, here's what I think the room sounds like, here's what I think the PA is doing, here's what I think the room's doing in there, and taking all that into account, here's how I think it's going to change. And I'm always a stickler for, I want to know how many tickets have sold and what balconies are up, what's shut, where people are going to be, and you know, so you can, if you arm yourself with as much of that information as possible, you can put yourself in a much better position out the gate, you know.
It's your armory. But don't you love those sometimes when you get, well, you don't, I don't love it, but it's just weird how sometimes you do all this, you've got all this brain power and everything, you get this one room and it flips on you. You know, it's like, if on paper everything should be like this, but you know, the band have gone into the first number, it's like, what the fuck's just happened in this room? You know what I mean?
It's when you think a room will tighten up really well and then it actually infinitely worse, or just stays exactly the same, and you're sort of looking at all the people in here, and you're looking at the humidity and the temperature and all those upholstered seats and thinking, well, why does it sound like an aircraft hangar?
Yeah. I love this. It's normally the bass as well. The bass just wandering. The bass has just decided to just, you know, react with all those people in. It's going walkabout. You've got no control over it whatsoever. You know.
It's always interesting when it all goes wrong. For me, I discipline myself to step back from the desk, put my hands behind my back, and count to 10 and listen, and put a list together in my head, rather than, you know, you see some people diving in and losing their mind, and you end up chopping out a load of bottom end out of the bass guitar or something because you're hearing something. It's actually a gate on the floor toms up and something's ringing or whatever. You know, I've
Oh, I had that. That's horrible.
Kind of just step back and think about it. You know.
Yeah.
Certainly when things don't work out as you expect, but. So one last question then to wrap up, and it's a big one, but if you could give everybody listening one piece of advice to improve their mix, be it a technical thing or be it an approach thing or a mental thing or anything, that one piece of advice that you think could help.
I just think be nice and helpful and courteous, because what you will find is if you're around for any period of time, you're going to be coming back to those venues again. You're going to be meeting people who are going to be doing maybe bigger things than you, maybe smaller things. It doesn't matter, you know, but you're going to be meeting these same people for years and years to come. And, you know, at the end of the day, we are all a family. And, you know, you can have a great career and a great time if you're just nice. You know, I hate these guys who are so uptight and just horrible. I just can't deal with that shit. That's just not, I don't get it. And I don't want it in my life, you know?
Yeah. No, that's great. Great. Well, thank you very much, my friend. I really appreciate
Nice one, man. I appreciated this a lot. It's good fun. You stay safe, yeah?
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Dave. That was great. Really enjoyed speaking to you as always, my friend. And as ever, this episode will be available on YouTube and at livesoundpodcast.co.uk after its initial 24 hours on TPI magazine. Join us next week when our guest will be Kevin McCarthy, and we're going to take a trip to the other end of the multi-core and talk about everything monitors. I think it's a really interesting interview, talking a lot about the psychological side of monitors and how best to communicate with the artist as well, more so than just the technical side of things. So, as always, it will be available for 24 hours on tpimagazine.com, and after that you can find it on our YouTube channel and also at livesoundpodcast.co.uk. Stay safe out there, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.